Every other little girl in class had puff sleeves. Anne felt that life was really not worth living without puff sleeves. You have come to the right place. Welcome. Welcome. I'm Lydia. I do DIY, style, and just resourceful, all around resourceful living videos. If you're interested in that, subscribe, hit the bell button so that you're notified when I post. And without further comment, let's get started. So I was perusing the Valville men's shirt rack, and I found this lovely, rich forest green shirt with blue and yellow woven plaid. I was like, I figured I would turn it into a puff sleeve shirt. I want to make a wrap crop top with large puff sleeves and cuffs. So these are the pieces you will need. I start by taking apart the shirt. I just cut it apart near the seams, and I seam ripped the sleeve seam because I wanted to keep as much width in the sleeves as possible because we want that puffed look, you know what I'm saying? I'm cutting the cuffs off, but I recommend seam ripping them off right away because you end up having to open up that seam anyway to reapply them onto your final shirt. For the front and back bodice of the puff sleeve top, I'm using my bodice blocks. If you've watched my jumpsuit tutorial part 1, I show how to copy a shirt and use it as a bodice. So I'll put a suggestion card above. For the front blouse, I am placing the front men's shirt pieces together. To create the wrap overlap, I'm taking advantage of the finished button plackets, and I'm placing the shoulder neck apex along the edge of the button placket and then angling out the block as far as it will go. Because I want a sash on this, I'm gonna reduce the length by 2 inches. So I'm marking 2 inches up from the waist to make room for those front ties. And because my block doesn't have seam allowance, I'm going to add it onto the fabric. So I'm adding about 1/2 inch all around the block. And also I'm making sure to include the front dart. For the back, I'm folding the back shirt in half and tracing out the back bodice. Just place your bodice block just under the yoke. I'm not marking 2 inches up on the back because I'm just gonna leave it long and the front will be the only part that has a sash because we don't have enough fabric for a sash all the way around unless you use a different shirt and use that fabric, and that's probably a really good idea. Probably should have thought of that originally. For the front tie sash, I'm cutting as much length of doubled 2.5 width strips as I can. So I'm using the bottom of the shirt, the front and back, and also the back yoke for extra length. And I want to double these. So on one side, you want a sash that is about the circumference of your waist. You want that entire length. And then for the other side, you just want it to extend about 6 or 7 inches from the front of the front center of the bodice. For the puff sleeves, I iron the original shirt sleeves just to make them nice and flat, and then I have chosen an extra fabric that I thought would work well with my shirt. It's just some fabric I had on hand, and I'm going to make an extension. So I'm adding 2 inches to the top, and I'm squaring the line down so that basically the sleeve is a big square, except for the curve of the top cap of the sleeve. You're going to cut 4 of these out, so 1 for each side of the sleeve. Make sure that you get the right orientation and the right side of the fabric, because that's important. To sew this, you want to pin your front and back darts in place and sew these. To create the back facing, you want to trace the back neckline along the shoulder and the neck. Then you want to measure the front placket of the shirt and add your neck seam allowance to that. Then mark this width all along the curve of the neckline and cut it out. To add the sash, you want to sandwich the front bodice between the right sides of the sash pieces, as shown. Sew in whatever seam allowance you chose. I did about a 1/2 inch. And again, remember to create a longer sash on the side that you want to wrap around and tie on the other side. So I just sewed a seam onto, I had to actually sew pieces together to create the length. To clean finish the bottom of the sash, you want to flip it back up, right sides to right sides, and sew this as far as you can. You do this by pushing the bodice down in between the sash pieces and sewing as far as it will fit. I was able to sew it all the way to the end, but if your fabric is thicker or there's more of it, then you might not be able to sew it to the end. In that case, just when you turn it out, sew that little area up that you couldn't sew from the inside. Turn up the bottom of the back bodice and stitch down to create a clean finished hem. Next, I sewed the facing on the back bodice. Then I opened the front button plackets and I sewed the shoulders together of the front and back. I folded back the facing and plackets and sewed these down neatly. Now what you want to do is take your sleeve triangles, sew them right sides to right sides of either side of the sleeve, and I included a top stitch to just clean finish it, but it's not necessary, you could just iron it down. I then created a large stitch on my machine and sewed the top and bottom of the sleeves. Leave the thread long on either side so that you can take one side of the thread, usually the bottom is best, and pull it, and you can just adjust the gather on this. So you'll see the curve of the armhole, and I am matching right sides to right sides the gathered sleeve head. Make sure that the top placket is on the side of the front of the blouse. So, of course, the placket goes where the wrist is and where the cuff is, but you want that on the side of the front. Gather the hem of the sleeve to match the cuff length, then sew the full underarm seam. The top placket is where the buttonhole is. So you want to match up the buttonhole side to the top overlapping placket, and then just sandwich everything in there, push everything in there about 1/2 inch, pin it in place, and then sew. I did a double stitch in that area. And that is the last step. Think about it every night and day. Spread my wings and fly away. I believe I can soar.